if you look at the early life of history's greatest monsters, you usually see warning signs. You see this innate charisma or early manipulation, just grand designs forming.
Sure.
But look at the early life of Adolf Hitler and you find a total void. So today on the Deep Dive, we are unpacking a really highly specific, just meticulously deconstructed video transcript from the YouTube channel End Times Productions.
It's a heavy one.
It really is. And our mission today is to objectively investigate their terrifying central thesis, which is that Hitler's sudden rise wasn't a product of latent political genius, but rather a literal supernatural possession.
Yeah, and just to be totally clear up front, we absolutely aren't endorsing this as historical fact.
Right, definitely not.
And we aren't taking sides on the underlying theology either.
Exactly. We are just going to act as investigative guides, following this creator's incredibly eerie, slow burn evidence trail just to see exactly where it leads.
And it is a fascinating trail to follow because it targets a very real, very unsettling historical contradiction. The creator of this video leverages a specific atmospheric tension to ask one core question, which is, how does a completely unremarkable nobody become a world breaker?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. To build their supernatural thesis, the source video has to first systematically dismantle the conventional myth of the born manipulator.
Right.
And they do that by taking us straight into the historical black hole of his 20s.
Right. So the video starts in Vienna. The year is 1910. We have a 21-year-old Hitler living in a men's homeless shelter.
Yeah.
He is surviving by painting these little mediocre scenic postcards of the city.
Just painting postcards.
Yeah, but the detail the source highlights here, it completely rewrites the script of the charismatic dictator because he couldn't actually sell these postcards himself.
Right. The transcript is explicit on this point. It wasn't that he preferred not to.
Right.
He physically and psychologically couldn't do it. He entirely lacked the courage, the basic conversational skills, and really just the fundamental confidence to simply walk up to a human being and ask them to buy a painting.
He was paralyzed.
He was completely paralyzed by social interaction.
I mean, if we think about this in modern terms, it's like he's the equivalent of a socially paralyzed internet troll of today,
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Someone who is entirely incapable of real-world interaction, just hiding in the shadows, entirely devoid of presence.
Yeah.
He was so terrified of people, he had to hire a proxy just to survive.
Exactly. A man named Reinhold Hosnitch.
Hosnitch.
Yeah, and Hosnitch was another drifter from that exact same homeless shelter. The source points out that Hitler relied entirely on Hosnitch to be his front man.
Wow.
Hosnitch was the one who had to, trudge into the taverns, navigate the local fairs, and actually strike up conversations with shop owners to sell these postcards for pennies.
And here is the kicker, which I just couldn't believe. They split the profits 50-50.
50-50.
Half of the meager income of the future dictator of Germany went to another homeless man simply because Hitler was too terrified to speak.
It's wild to think about.
I mean, let that sink in for a moment. The man whose voice would later command millions, whose speeches would practically hypnotize an entire nation, had to pay a guy to speak for him in a tavern.
It really establishes a baseline of complete social impotence.
Yeah.
The video uses this to strip away any illusion of latent charm. And it doesn't stop there. The creator moves us to another scene from this era, one that is perhaps even more degrading.
Okay, what is it?
Vienna's West Station.
Right, the luggage thing. So picture the platform. It's a busy morning. Steam trains are pulling in. Wealthy travelers are stepping off with heavy suitcases.
Yeah.
And they are actively scanning the crowd for a porter, just someone, anyone, to carry their bags.
Right.
And standing right there in the crowd is a thin, young Hitler actively trying to get a job moving this luggage.
And he is rejected. Not just once, but continually. The travelers would look at him, and they simply wouldn't give him their luggage.
Wait, let's unpack this for a second. Because if you are a tired traveler stepping off a train, you just want your bag carried.
Exactly.
You don't need a charismatic philosopher, you just need a willing pair of hands.
Anyone will do.
Right, so if this guy couldn't even convince a tired, wealthy traveler to let him carry a suitcase, how do we bridge the gap to him mesmerizing hundreds of thousands of people at Nuremberg?
You can't.
Right, what is the missing link there?
And that is the exact tension the source wants the viewer to feel. The creator is intentionally building a massive, inexplicable chasm between the man in 1910 and the man in 1930.
Right, it's a huge gap.
And the wider that historical gap, the more drastic the catalyst required to cross it.
Makes sense.
So to widen that gap even further, the narrative shifts from the streets of Vienna to the trenches of World War I.
Right, so fast forward a few years, the Great War breaks out, and Hitler joins the army. Now, conventional wisdom tells us that shared combat, the sheer unadulterated horrors of the trench, the mud, the artillery.
The worst conditions imaginable.
Exactly, the constant looming threat of death. That is usually the fastest way human beings bond.
Absolutely.
It creates an unbreakable brotherhood.
It is a profoundly well-documented psychological phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Men who survive that kind of intense crucible together are bonded for life by something invisible but profoundly strong.
Yeah.
They share trauma, they share gallows humor, they share singular focus on keeping each other alive. But the source emphasizes that, for Hitler, this bonding simply didn't happen.
Wait, hold on, though. Even the most annoying, abrasive guys in a platoon usually form some sort of trauma bond with their unit. Are you saying he had absolutely zero friends in the deadliest war in history?
The historical record the video pulls from suggests exactly that.
Wow.
He was a pariah in his own foxhole. His fellow soldiers left behind diaries and memories of him, and they are bleak.
What did they say?
Well, he never laughed. He never joked. When everyone else was trying to cope with the nightmare around them, complaining about the food, the rats, the mud.
Which is just how soldiers survive psychologically.
Exactly. It's human nature.
Yeah.
But the source notes that Hitler would just lecture them on patriotism.
So he's the guy in the middle of an artillery bombardment giving an unsolicited TED Talk on the glory of the fatherland.
Precisely. And the exact quote highlighted in the video from the men he served with is chilling in its bluntness. They said, "We all cursed him."
They cursed him.
Yeah, they didn't just ignore him as an oddball. They actively despised him.
That is so dark.
Right. They fought a brutal war alongside him and walked away with zero respect for him. He emerged from a 4-year slaughter with no friends, no presence, and absolutely no pull.
Which leads us perfectly to 1919. The war is over. Germany is defeated. And an army intelligence officer named Karl Mayr is tasked with assessing Hitler when he walks into his unit back in Munich.
Yes, Karl Mayr.
And the source zeroes in heavily on Mayr's specific description because it really frames the entire supernatural theory. Mayr wrote that Hitler was a, quote, tired and stray dog looking for a master.
What's fascinating here is the sheer absence of agency in that clinical description.
Yeah.
When an intelligence officer calls you a stray dog, he isn't calling you a leader. He isn't calling you a threat or a mastermind.
Right, you're not a lone wolf, you're a stray dog.
Exactly. A stray dog is a creature defined entirely by its emptiness, its submission, its desperate, pathetic need for something external to give it purpose and direction.
Wow.
Mayr looked at this 30-year-old veteran and saw a man ready to work for literally anyone who tossed him a scrap of basic kindness.
A man who, by the way the source adds, had recently tried to become a mail carrier but couldn't even pass the entrance test?
I know it's absurd.
It is a wild twist of fate to realize the 20th century might have looked completely different if the Austrian Postal Service just had slightly lower hiring standards.
It's a dark thought, but it perfectly caps off the complete inventory of his failures. Let's look at the timeline the video lays out for the viewer.
Okay, so he is 30 years old. He has been rejected by art schools twice. Rejected by strangers at a train station.
Right.
Rejected by his own voice, needing a proxy to sell art in taverns. Rejected by the Postal Service. Rejected and cursed by the men he fought a war alongside.
Yeah.
And finally, described by military intelligence as a stray dog.
Yet despite that unbroken streak of utter mediocrity, within 4 years of this absolute rock bottom, he is the most powerful magnetic speaker in Europe.
Just 4 years.
4 years. Within 14 years, he owns Germany entirely. Within 20, he is actively burning down the world.
See, a transformation that drastic, that sudden, it requires a monumental catalyst.
It has to.
You don't just acquire world-changing charisma at age 30 out of nowhere. It doesn't just poof into existence.
No, it doesn't.
And the source video argues it wasn't his charisma at all. It was delivered to him.
And this brings us to the specific, documented moments the creator identifies as the turning points.
The catalyst moments.
Right, the moments of what we might call activation.
Yeah.
To find the first one, the narrative takes us back to the mud of the Western Front, where Hitler was serving as a dispatch runner.
Right, the creator pulls a very specific story that Hitler himself told years later to a British journalist named G. Ward Prince.
That's right.
The scene is this. Hitler is sitting with his comrades in the trench, the very guys who curse him, and he's eating dinner out of a tin. And according to his own recounting, something impossible happens.
The exact words from the source transcript are crucial to the theory here. Hitler told the journalist, "Suddenly a voice seemed to be saying to me, 'Get up, go over there.'
Yeah.
It was so clear and insistent that I obeyed it automatically as if it had been a military order."
Wow. So he stands up mid-bite, walks 20 yards down the trench, sits back down alone, and the exact spot he just left takes a direct artillery hit.
Yeah.
Everyone he was sitting with, the entire group, is killed instantly.
Now, setting aside the obvious survivor's guilt or trauma one might normally associate with such a near-death event, the video creator focuses entirely on the mechanics of Hitler's response.
Right.
Specifically, the phrase automatic obedience.
Right, because he didn't say, "I had a gut feeling," or "I sense danger."
Right.
He didn't even say his instincts kicked in. He said he obeyed it automatically, like a military order.
If we connect this to the bigger picture the creator is painting, this is a pivotal insight. A man who obeys an external, disembodied voice automatically, without question, without hesitation, is a man who can be completely steered by an outside entity.
The stray dog has found a voice that gives it commands.
Exactly.
It's incredibly eerie. It sets this terrifying precedent that his survival wasn't luck, it was orchestration.
Yes.
But the source argues that simply surviving wasn't enough. Surviving didn't give him his power. The actual transformation, the so-called download of world-breaking charisma, has a specific location and a paper trail.
October 1918. A British mustard gas attack near Ypres.
So Hitler is caught in the thick of it. He is blinded. He is rendered completely voiceless. He is shipped off the line to a military hospital in a small Pomeranian town called Pasewalk.
Yeah, Pasewalk.
The war is ending, Germany is collapsing into revolution, and this 30-year-old nobody is sitting in a hospital ward, blind, mute, and utterly empty.
This is where the video takes a significant turn.
Okay.
It introduces two declassified intelligence files to ground its supernatural theory in official bureaucratic documentation.
Oh, wow.
The first is an OSS psychological analysis of Hitler.
And for those who might not know, the OSS, or the Office of Strategic Services, was essentially the precursor to the CIA. They were the intelligence agency operating during World War II.
Right, and in 1943, they tasked a psychoanalyst named Walter Langer with building a comprehensive psychological profile of Hitler, trying to figure out what made him tick, how he might react to defeat, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and the source claims this official OSS report indicates that Hitler's dark mission came to him right there in that Pasewalk hospital in a vision.
A literal vision.
A supernatural vision where he was, quote, chosen by Providence to complete a great mission and to save Germany.
The language used there, providence, is key to the video's thesis.
Yeah.
It implies direct divine or supernatural intervention.
Yep.
And then the creator layers on the second document a naval intelligence report currently sitting in the National Archives, listed as report number 31963.
This document is fascinating because it records the findings of a Berlin neurologist who examined Hitler at Pasewalk.
Right.
And this doctor concluded that Hitler's blindness wasn't in his eyes. It wasn't physical ocular damage from the mustard gas.
Nope.
Whatever shut his throat and blinded his eyes, it was psychological. Or, according to the source's framing, it was external.
What the neurologist was diagnosing is generally known as hysterical blindness, or a conversion disorder.
Okay, what is that exactly?
It's a real, documented biological and psychological phenomena where extreme trauma essentially short-circuits the brain. The physical eyes work perfectly fine, but the brain refuses to process the visual information.
Wow, so the trauma is so overwhelming that it converts into physical symptoms.
Exactly. But the video uses this clinical diagnosis to paint a much darker cinematic picture. We have the before picture, the blind, voiceless, empty stray dog lying in a Pomeranian hospital ward, completely devoid of influence.
Yeah.
And then we have the after.
So within months of leaving that hospital ward, he is standing up in a Munich beer hall. Karl Meyer, the same intelligence officer who dismissed him as a stray dog, assigns him to keep tabs on a tiny, irrelevant 50-person group called the German Workers' Party.
Right. And Hitler joins as member number 55.
And suddenly, the voiceless man is speaking with an unprecedented, world-shifting magnetism. He is spellbinding hardened combat veterans.
Out of nowhere.
Meyer himself is stunned, openly wondering in his reports where this sudden power is coming from.
Yeah, he couldn't believe it.
Within 4 years of that hospital stay, tens of thousands of people are standing in the freezing rain just to hear him speak. People are weeping just looking at him.
It's a total inversion of his entire life up to that point.
And I know half our listeners right now are rolling their eyes thinking this sounds like a script for a horror movie, not history. We have to ask a critical question here.
Sure.
Could this sudden, explosive gift of speaking simply be a massive psychological break? Couldn't this just be a severe trauma response manifesting as extreme narcissism, delusion, and a hysterical confidence, rather than a supernatural download of charisma?
That is precisely the standard historical and psychological interpretation.
Right, that makes sense.
Historians widely agree that the compounded trauma of the war, the horrific experience of the gas attack, and the shock of his nation's collapse forged a fanatical zealot.
Yeah.
The hysterical blindness was the crucible. When his sight returned, it was accompanied by a messianic complex. It's a psychological explanation for a psychological phenomenon.
But the source video aggressively rejects that naturalistic explanation.
Totally rejects it.
The creator argues this wasn't trauma, it was a transaction.
A transaction.
He went into that ward completely empty, and he came out filled with an assignment and the specific unnatural tools, persuasion, dark charisma, mass magnetism, just all the tools needed to execute it.
And to prove this transactional theory, the video makes a fascinating pivot.
Yeah.
It turns away from 20th century intelligence files and points directly at a 2,000-year-old text.
This is where the video's framework shifts from a gritty historical mystery into just grand, dark theology.
Yeah, it attempts to explain the mechanism of worldly power through the lens of the biblical temptation of Jesus, specifically found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 4.
Okay, let's walk through the creator's logic here, because it reads less like a religious sermon and more like a supernatural legal contract.
It really does.
So the scene is famous. Satan takes Jesus onto a high mountain and shows him all the kingdoms of the world in a single moment.
Right. And the source focuses heavily on the specific contractual dialogue Satan uses. Satan says, "All this power I will give to thee, and all the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me, and to whomsoever I will give it."
So the video treats this scripture like a corporate policy statement.
Yes.
Satan is openly claiming to be the god of this world who holds the literal, exclusive distribution rights to worldly power. He is claiming, on the record, that he has the authority to hand the kingdoms of the earth to whoever he chooses.
And the crucial point the creator makes is about Jesus' reaction to this offer.
Right.
Jesus refuses the offer, obviously, but he never disputes the underlying claim.
Oh, wow.
He doesn't say, "You can't offer me the kingdoms of the world because you don't own them." By not refuting the claim, the text implicitly validates that Satan actually possesses this specific terrifying authority.
So applying this ancient template to Hitler, the source is saying that Hitler was offered the exact same package that Jesus rejected.
Precisely. The creator argues that the entity's one great terrifying power is the ability to pick a person and hand them the world.
Right.
And in that hospital ward in Pasewalk, Hitler, a man with no talent, no future, and no influence, was picked.
It's like a cosmic hostile takeover.
Yeah.
Think of a failing company. The stray dog was an incredibly undervalued, entirely empty asset. He was a shell with zero equity.
Right.
And that makes him the absolute perfect vessel for an outside CEO, in this case a dark entity, to step in, assume absolute control without any internal resistance, and execute a new, aggressive agenda.
That analogy fits the source's narrative perfectly. A hostile takeover of a human soul.
Wow.
Hitler accepted the transaction, the kingdoms, the glory, the dark charisma. It was all delivered in that hospital ward in exchange for control.
Okay, so if we buy this hostile takeover theory for a second, a new CEO doesn't just sit quietly in the boardroom, they flex their muscles.
Right, they make moves.
So do we have any historical record of Hitler actually acknowledging the CEO driving him?
Yeah.
I mean, if an entity actually climbed inside this empty man and took the wheel, wouldn't it eventually slip up and show itself?
According to the video, it did. Repeatedly.
Got it.
And on the public record.
Okay, weird.
The creator presents three main witnesses to validate this possession theory, starting with Hitler's own public speeches.
Which takes us to March 1936 in Munich. Hitler has just marched troops into the demilitarized Rhineland.
Yeah.
And this was a massive gamble.
It was an unbelievable risk.
Mm-hmm.
The German army was still relatively weak. If France had mobilized its vastly superior forces and pushed back, it could have ended Hitler's regime right there. The
Right.
generals were terrified.
But France didn't move. Hitler won the gamble through sheer bluff, so he is standing before a massive crowd in Munich giving his victory speech.
Right.
This is the moment where every dictator in history puffs out their chest and brags about their own infallible strategic brilliance, like, I am a genius, I outsmarted the French, right?
But the source notes that Hitler doesn't do that. Instead, he utters a very specific, incredibly strange phrase.
What does he say?
He says to the crowd, "I go the way the providence dictates with the assurance of a sleepwalker."
A sleepwalker. The most powerful man in Europe, at the absolute peak of his geopolitical triumph, describes himself in front of a massive crowd as an unconscious body.
If we connect this directly back to the incident in the World War I trench, the pattern is striking.
Yeah.
In the trench, he obeyed a disembodied voice automatically, as if it had been a military order.
Right.
20 years later, in Munich, he is a sleepwalker guided by Providence. The video argues this is an open, arrogant admission.
Wow.
He is calmly announcing that he cannot fail because he isn't the one driving the car. The entity steering him is guaranteeing his success.
It's a terrifying interpretation of a historical quote, but stick with us because the video creator doesn't just rely on theology and cryptic metaphors here. They pull in an actual clinical diagnosis from one of the most famous scientists alive at the time to back this up.
Right. In that very same month, March 1936, across the border in Zurich, Switzerland, the famed psychiatrist Carl Jung publishes a deeply unsettling essay.
Okay, for context, Carl Jung is one of the founding fathers of modern psychology.
Yes.
He is watching the rise of the Third Reich, and he is horrified. He isn't looking at it as a politician. He's looking at it as a doctor diagnosing a patient. He looks at what is happening to the entire German population, and he writes an essay titled with a single word, Wotan.
Wotan, also known in Norse mythology as Odin, the ancient Germanic god of frenzy, the storm, and the wild hunt.
Right?
Jung is attempting to diagnose the mass hysteria gripping Germany, the sudden violent awakening of a nation. To do this, he relies on his theory of the collective unconscious, the idea that ancient myths and archetypes live deep within the psychological basement of a culture.
And the specific clinical term Jung coins for this condition in his essay is Griffenheit.
Berghof, yeah, which roughly translates to a state of being seized.
Seized.
It's a profound, heavy psychological concept. Jung clinically declared that, quote, "One man who is obviously possessed has infected a whole nation to such an extent that everything is set in motion and has started rolling on its course towards perdition."
A globally renowned psychiatrist, writing in a peer-reviewed context, uses the literal word possessed to describe Hitler.
It's pretty staggering. Now, we have to be analytical here. Was Jung speaking metaphorically? Was he using possession and Wotan as psychological archetypes to describe a cultural mass hysteria?
Right. Was he saying that the dormant, destructive, nationalistic traits of the Germanic people had simply been awakened by trauma and propaganda?
That is exactly how most historians and psychologists read Jung's essay today. That it's a brilliant, poetic metaphor for collective psychosis.
But the video we are analyzing emphatically says no, it is not a metaphor. The creator claims Jung was diagnosing a literal demonic entity, and the source points to one specific, easily overlooked sentence in Jung's essay to prove it.
Jung wrote, almost in passing, about the history of the ancient Germanic tribes. He noted that after these tribes turned to Christianity, Wotan was, quote, changed by Christianity into the devil.
Right, because the early Christian missionaries didn't look at the pagan god Wotan as just a silly fairy tale or a metaphor.
No, they didn't.
They viewed him as a literal, spiritual enemy. The source argues that these missionaries believed Wotan was actually Satan himself, masquerading as a pagan god to receive worship from the tribes.
And the creator claims this is what fallen angels do. They change masks depending on the era and the culture they are trying to manipulate.
And the video throws in a fascinating linguistic detail to show how deeply embedded this ancient entity is in our daily culture. The name Wotan, or Woden, is the root of the word Wednesday, Woden's Day.
Oh, wow. Right.
The source is arguing that Carl Jung, relying purely on psychiatric observation, independently diagnosed the exact same entity that visited Hitler in the hospital ward, Satan, wearing the ancient mask of the god Wotan.
So Jung's essentially saying Wotan wasn't dead, just dormant, like a piece of malware written into the cultural hard drive centuries ago.
Yeah.
And Hitler was just the empty USB drive that finally executed the program.
That is a perfect way to visualize the creator's argument. Jung saw the malware activating across an entire nation.
So what does this all mean? We have Hitler calling himself a sleepwalker, and we have Carl Jung calling him possessed by Wotan.
Right.
But the video saves its most explosive piece of evidence for last. A private, staggering confession made to another dictator.
This part is wild. So the setting is the Berghof, Hitler's famous sprawling mountain retreat in the Bavarian Alps. Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy, is visiting.
Yeah.
The video sets the scene. Hitler brings Mussolini away from the generals and the politicians into his private library, and he proudly shows off rows and rows of rare volumes. These aren't military histories or economic texts. They are 16th and 17th century occult books.
Occult books.
Yeah, Hitler's essentially bragging to Mussolini about his deep esoteric knowledge of the dark arts.
We only know the details of this bizarre conversation because of an account Mussolini gave years later.
Right.
On Easter Sunday in 1945, just weeks before he was executed, Mussolini recounted exactly what Hitler told him in that library.
The quote Mussolini provided is incredible. He said that Hitler tried to make him believe that he was, quote, mystically and scientifically convinced of being possessed not by a demon, but by a spirit of prehistoric Aryan mythology.
Let's synthesize this, because the video views this as a profound, undeniable double confession.
A double confession.
Yeah. The first layer is the admission itself. Hitler, in private, to the one man in Europe he considered somewhat of a peer, admitted that he knew his power wasn't his own. He was mystically and scientifically convinced he was possessed.
He knew he was the stray dog.
Exactly.
He knew the empty vessel had been filled, and he was fully aware of the entity steering the car. But the second layer is the bizarre denial within the confession.
Exactly. He denies it's a demon. He explicitly says, not by a demon, and instead claims it's a spirit of prehistoric mythology, an old god.
But by naming a prehistoric spirit, he unknowingly aligns perfectly with what Carl Jung published years earlier about Wotan. And according to the source, he aligns perfectly with the biblical method of Satan posing as an angel of light or a luminous ancient being. He confessed to the possession and then accurately described the exact mythological mask the entity was wearing to deceive him.
It ties the entire narrative architecture of the video together.
It really does.
You have three entirely disparate witnesses. The ancient biblical text in Luke describing the transactional rules of worldly power. The modern psychiatrist in Zurich diagnosing a literal possession by an old god.
Yeah.
And the dictator himself privately confessing to being driven by a prehistoric spirit. They're all, from the video's perspective, describing the exact same supernatural event from different angles.
It is a dark cinematic puzzle where every piece suddenly clicks into place. You know, the disembodied voice in the trench demanding automatic obedience, the vision in the Pasewalk hospital delivering the keys to the kingdom, the sudden, inexplicable explosion of charisma in a man who used to pay homeless drifters to speak for him, the sleepwalker guided by providence. It all points back to the creator's central, terrifying thesis.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, to the grand conclusion the video drives toward, it's about the ultimate purpose of that possession.
The motive.
Right. If an ancient supernatural entity takes over an empty vessel like the stray dog in 1918, it doesn't do it just to observe history unfold. It has specific appetites. It has goals.
It wanted to change the world, and it wanted to burn it down.
Yes.
The source argues that the entirety of the Third Reich, the relentless mechanized hatred, the global destruction, that wasn't just human politics gone wrong. It was the literal footprint of that entity's documented possession. It was Satan, or Wotan, cashing in the chips from the hospital ward transaction.
The reason this specific YouTube video is so captivating, regardless of one's belief in the supernatural, is that humanity is desperate for an explanation.
We really are.
We are desperate to understand how such profound, world-breaking, absolute evil could originate from such an unremarkable, untalented, deeply pathetic man.
Yeah.
The conventional historical answers, trauma, economic depression, political opportunism.
Yeah.
While factually true, they sometimes feel emotionally inadequate for the sheer scale of the horror.
We want the math of evil to make sense. We want a monster to look like a monster from day one. When history tells us he was just a rejected postcard painter who couldn't even carry a suitcase, it breaks our brains.
It has.
The source offers a supernatural shortcut to that answer. It says, you're right, the math doesn't add up. Because he had outside help.
It replaces the unsettling reality of human mass hysteria with a slightly more comprehensible narrative of a dark fairy tale, a literal monster wearing a human suit.
And as objective observers, looking at the missing charisma, the hospital visions, the sleepwalker speeches, and the Berghof confessions, we can easily attribute all of this to extreme trauma, malignant narcissism, and a fractured nation susceptible to a fanatical voice.
Sure, we can explain it all away with psychology and historical context. Perhaps there is a simple, purely natural explanation for the sudden rise of the stray dog.
Exactly. But the video leaves us lingering in the shadows of that historical record, pointing out the anomalies that don't quite fit the clinical diagnosis.
It does.
But if there is a simple explanation, Why did Hitler himself seem so deeply scientifically convinced that the entity driving him was standing right behind the wheel? Why did he believe the voice in his head was real? It's a dark question, and maybe one history can never fully answer. Something for you to think about. Until next time on The Deep Dive.